What would you do if you were standing on the deck of a floating palace, feeling the vibration of invincible power beneath your feet, the icy Atlantic air on your face, knowing you were making history? What would you do if, suddenly, that vibration turned into a violent, strange scraping sound, seeming to come from the very bowels of the ocean? Imagine the sound. Not an explosion, but a deep, prolonged grinding noise that barely manages to cut through the music of the orchestra still playing in the grand salon. Feel the sudden chill in the air, which now seems sharper, more menacing. You smell the sea salt, but now it's mixed with a foreign scent, the smell of ancient ice being torn apart by thousands of tons of steel. You see people stop their conversations, a champagne glass halfway to their lips, exchanging glances that flicker between curiosity and a fear they dare not yet name. This is not a literary invention. This was the exact sensation for more than 2,200 souls on the night of April 14th, 1912. What you are about to hear is not just the story of the most famous shipwreck in history. It is the minute-by-minute account of the last 12 hours of life aboard the Titanic, from the opulence of dinner to the frozen silence of the North Atlantic. The year is 1912. You are at the pinnacle of a golden age, a time of absolute faith in human ingenuity. The Second Industrial Revolution has forged a new world, where steam and steel are the gods of a new religion, technology. And on the altar of that religion stands an unparalleled monument, the Titanic. It is not merely a ship. It is the embodiment of the Belle Epoque, a bold, floating declaration of man's dominion over the forces of nature. It is the pride of the White Star Line, its ultimate weapon in the fierce battle for Atlantic prestige against its great rival, the Cunard Line. This isn't just a race for speed. It's a competition for luxury, for grandeur, for building a perfect world in the middle of the ocean. And that world is perfectly stratified, just like the society that created it. Imagine the unprecedented opulence of first class. These are not cabins. They are palatial suites. Their occupants stroll through Parisian-style cafes, play squash on a state-of-the-art court, and relax in Turkish baths that rival those of any European capital. A few decks below, second class enjoys a respectable comfort, a discreet elegance for professionals and well-to-do families. It is a world of polished wood and impeccable service, a bridge between the opulence above and the hope below, because on the lower decks, in third class, travels hope itself. Hundreds of immigrants, entire families who have gambled their life savings on a dream called America. Their conditions are modest, but clean and dignified, infinitely better than on other ships. For them, the Titanic is not a luxury. It is a vessel to a new life. And over all of them, from the wealthiest millionaire to the humblest child, hangs one word, one unbreakable belief: unsinkable. It's not a marketing slogan. It is a technical conviction, based on a revolutionary design of 16 watertight compartments, a marvel of engineering that, in the minds of everyone on board and ashore, made disaster, quite simply, unthinkable. The afternoon of Sunday, April 14th, was the apotheosis of normality and luxury aboard the Titanic. It was the climax of a perfect voyage, a day suspended in time where everything functioned like flawless clockwork. Imagine the routine of that day. Hear the murmur of conversations in the Café Parisien, the clinking of fine porcelain cups. Smell the mixture of leather and cigar smoke in the first-class smoking room, a masculine sanctuary where deals were closed and politics were discussed. Feel the weak afternoon sun on your face, a sun fighting against an ever-intensifying cold, yet still inviting a stroll along the deck. Listen to the laughter of third-class children, running and playing on the poop deck, oblivious to the rigid social divisions that separate them from the luxurious lounges. That evening, the taste of triumph is served in 10 courses. The first-class dinner is a legendary event, a symphony of flavors and textures designed to delight the most discerning palates. In contrast, the third-class meal is simpler, but it is hearty and hot, a comfort for those who have left everything behind. But while the passengers immerse themselves in this perfect tranquility, one man is fighting a silent battle. Jack Phillips, the radio operator, is buried under a mountain of messages. They are personal telegrams, greetings to family, business instructions. The novel wireless telegraph is the fashionable toy of the rich. Phillips is so overwhelmed, so focused on transmitting this flood of trivialities, that the truly important messages become an annoying background noise. Multiple ice warnings, sent by nearby ships like the Masaba and the Californian, pile up on his desk. Some never even reach the bridge. One of those crucial warnings, detailing a massive ice field directly in the Titanic's path, is met with an irritated reply. Shut up, I'm busy. A sentence that will seal the fate of hundreds. Somewhere on deck, Major Archibald Butt, a respected military advisor to presidents, writes a letter. He describes the monstrous calm of the ship, the almost boring perfection of its operation. He has no idea that the real danger lies not in the ocean, but in the silence of unread messages, just a few meters from where he stands. The encounter with the iceberg was not a violent, cinematic collision. It was an eerily subtle event, a ghostly touch in the darkness that deceived most of those on board. Now, put yourself in the shoes of the lookout, Frederick Fleet. You are in the crow's nest, the highest point of the ship. It is a moonless night of absolute blackness. The sea is unnaturally calm, like a black mirror, making it almost impossible to spot the white water breaking at the base of an iceberg. Suddenly, your eyes catch something, a dark mass, barely a shade blacker than the night itself, looming out of nowhere. Horror freezes you for a second. Then, instinct takes over. You ring the warning bell 3 times. You grab the telephone. Iceberg. Right ahead. On the bridge, First Officer Murdoch's desperate command echoes into the night. Hard a starboard, full astern. He attempts an impossible maneuver to turn and brake a 46,000-ton colossus launched at full speed. For the passengers, the sensation was bewildering. Some described it as a slight stumble. Others, as if the ship were rolling over 1,000 glass marbles. Many, in the depths of their cabins, didn't even wake up. The scrape, the graze awe was so brief and so strange that it didn't fit any preconceived notion of a disaster. The truth was far more insidious than a great gash. The iceberg didn't tear the hull open. Its underwater spur acted like a faulty can opener. It bent, buckled, and popped the steel plates below the waterline for nearly 300 feet. The pressure made the rivets fail, the thousands of metal pins holding the ship together. A series of small fissures opened up, seemingly minor but mortal wounds. Water began to pour in, not into one compartment, but into 6 of them. The Titanic was designed to be a genius of survival. She could float with 2, 3, even her first 4 watertight compartments completely flooded, but not with 6. It was her Achilles heel, a failure no one had ever imagined possible. Amid the confusion, the man who knows the ship's soul best is summoned. Thomas Andrews, her architect, is called to the bridge. With blueprints in hand, he descends into the bowels of his creation. Imagine his descent. The elegant silence of the upper decks gives way to a growing roar. The sound of the North Atlantic, at 2 degrees below zero, pouring in, devouring his masterpiece. He returns to the bridge, pale, with the certainty of the end in his eyes. He makes a quick, terrible calculation on a piece of paper. He delivers the verdict to Captain Smith. The ship has, optimistically, 2 hours before she sinks. In that moment, the look on the captain's face seals the fate of everyone on board. To understand the tragedy of the Titanic, we must understand the blind faith in its technology. The watertight compartments were the ultimate expression of safety. Imagine a series of vertical steel walls dividing the ship's hull into 16 sections. If a breach occurred, watertight doors would close, isolating the flood and keeping the ship afloat. It was a brilliant system, but with a fatal design flaw. Those steel walls did not extend all the way to the top deck. They were like an ice cube tray. If you tilt the tray far enough, the water from one section spills over into the next, and then the next. That is exactly what happened to the Titanic. At the same time, Marconi's wireless telegraph was the other great technological revolution, a marvel that allowed for instantaneous communication across the ocean. But in 1912, it was still in its infancy. The radio room was not a 24-hour safety center. It was a luxury service, a convenience for first-class passengers to send their messages. That is why the radio operator of the SS Californian bikeside, the ship closest to the Titanic, only a few miles away, simply turned off his set and went to bed minutes before the collision. He was tired of the Titanic's operator shouting at him for trying to warn him about the ice. He missed the distress calls that could have saved hundreds. Now, let's return to that small radio room aboard the Titanic. Captain Smith enters, his face a mask of gravity. He orders the operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, to send the distress signal. They begin with the standard code of the time, CQD. As the ship lists and panic begins to set in, Bride suggests to Phillips that he try the new signal, the one few had ever used, SOS. It may be your last chance to send it, he jokes with chilling bravery. And so, the Titanic becomes one of the first ships in history to broadcast the call for help that would become universal. These two men, Phillips and Bride, would remain at their post long after being ordered to abandon it. With icy water swirling at their feet, with the ship's power failing, they continued to send signals, again and again, until the silence was absolute. Their persistence was an act of pure heroism in the midst of the unfolding chaos. The first hour after the impact was a surreal piece of theater, a strange mix of confusion, denial, and an unshakable faith in the word everyone knew, unsinkable. The ship cannot sink. To calm the nerves of the passengers beginning to gather on deck, the orchestra, led by Wallace Hartley, began to play. Not solemn music, but ragtime. Cheerful, lively tunes that created a grotesque contrast to the situation. Imagine the scene. Officers trying with forced composure to organize the evacuation, and first-class passengers who refuse to leave the warmth of the lounges. Leave my suite for a tiny lifeboat in the middle of the freezing night. It's absurd. This is just a drill. This sense of unreality, that it was all an overcautious drill, took hold of many. Jokes were made about the ice. People played with the chunks that some had picked up from the foredeck. No one could accept the enormity of what was happening. But behind this superficial calm lay a terrifying truth. The Titanic, the largest and most luxurious ship in the world, carried lifeboats for only 1,178 people, little more than half the souls on board. And, astonishingly, this was legal. Maritime safety regulations were so outdated that they were based on a ship's tonnage, not its passenger count. The Titanic met and even exceeded the law. To make matters worse, panic and a lack of training led to a fatal error. The crew, afraid that the lifeboats would not support the weight if they were full, began launching them half-empty. The first boat, with a capacity for 65, was lowered with only 28 people. Another, with a capacity for 40, left with a mere 12. In the midst of this collective denial, stories of incredible dignity emerged. Isidore Straus, the co-founder of Macy's department store, and his wife Ida, approached a lifeboat. Ida, as a woman, was offered a seat. She refused. She refused to leave her husband. "I will not be separated from my husband," she said. "As we have lived, so will we die, together." They were last seen sitting calmly on deck chairs, watching the world they knew vanish, an eternal testament to love and resignation. As the ship's bow sank ever deeper, the list of the deck became undeniable. The strange calm shattered and gave way to desperate panic. The veneer of civilization cracked, revealing the very best and the very worst of human nature. The sound changed dramatically. The orchestra's music became more solemn. They left the ragtime behind and began to play hymns, a soundtrack for the end of the world. And then, the first screams were heard. A deafening roar filled the air. It was the sound of steam, vented at immense pressure from the giant funnels to prevent the boilers from exploding. A thunderous noise that drowned out voices and heightened the terror. In the dark sky, signal rockets burst, but they were white, not red. In the maritime code of the time, white rockets indicated a ship needed assistance, that it was in trouble. They did not convey the extreme urgency of red rockets, which screamed imminent danger. The nearby Californian saw them, but its captain assumed they were fireworks from a millionaire's party. The policy of women and children first, a code of honor of the sea, was applied with fatal inconsistency. On the port side of the ship, Second Officer Lightoller interpreted it in the strictest possible way. Only women and children. He turned away men who could have filled empty seats in the boats. On the starboard side, First Officer Murdoch was more pragmatic. Women and children first, yes, but if no more were nearby, he allowed men to board. This difference in judgment, this decision made in seconds amidst the chaos, had direct life-or-death consequences for dozens of people. The fate of the passengers was written on their ticket. 18-year-old Madeline Astor, pregnant and wife of one of the world's richest men, was gently guided to a lifeboat. Her husband, John Jacob Astor, asked if he could join her but was refused. He said his goodbyes and stayed behind, like a gentleman of his era. Meanwhile, in the depths of the ship, third-class passengers were fighting for their lives. They found themselves trapped in a labyrinth of corridors now tilting at impossible angles, gates and grills. Designed to maintain strict class segregation and comply with U.S. immigration laws, became deadly barriers, delaying or preventing their access to the boat deck. Theirs was a desperate climb from darkness toward a rapidly vanishing hope. The bright, colorful brochures of the White Star Line sold a dream. They depicted a floating palace of unparalleled safety and luxury. They spoke of its double hull and watertight compartments as an absolute guarantee against any disaster. The reality of that night was the brutal demolition of that propaganda. The steel of the hull, believed to be the strongest in the world, proved to be brittle in the freezing temperatures of the North Atlantic, shattering like glass. The lifeboats, which met the legal minimum, were a terribly inadequate fraction of what was needed. And the crew, though heroic in countless individual acts, had never been trained for a full-scale evacuation in the dead of night. The dream they sold became a living nightmare. But the cruelest counterpoint of all was not between propaganda and reality, but between first and third class. The statistics tell a chilling story. About 61% of first-class passengers survived. Of the third class, only 24% survived. This was not just a matter of luck, it was a matter of geography. First-class cabins were on the upper decks, just a short walk from the lifeboats. Third-class quarters were in the bowels of the ship, at the lowest levels and at the far ends of the bow and stern. Imagine the odyssey of an Irish family in third class, awakened by the noise, with no clear information, trying to navigate with their children through tilting, dark, and unfamiliar corridors, searching for an exit, any exit, to the open air as the icy water rises up the stairwells. Their struggle stands in stark contrast to the relatively orderly, almost calm, evacuation of first-class passengers during the first hour of the catastrophe. For some, it was an inconvenience. For others, it was a death trap. The last 15 minutes of the Titanic were an apocalyptic scene, a spectacle of terror and of technological wonder in its final agony, which defied the imagination of those who witnessed it. Sound became the absolute protagonist. As the tilt became almost vertical, everything not bolted down inside the ship broke loose. Imagine a deafening roar, an endless thunder. It was grand pianos, solid oak furniture, thousands of plates and glasses, and the giant 20-ton boilers, tearing away from their foundations and cascading down towards the flooded bow. To this internal roar was added the groan of the ship itself, the sound of metal, of thousands of tons of steel, bending and twisting beyond its breaking point. Then, the unthinkable happened. The stern of the ship rose dramatically out of the water, climbing higher and higher until it pointed almost directly at the starry sky. For a moment, its 3 giant propellers, each the size of a house, were exposed to the air, a silent monument to the power that was now drowning. The stress on the structure became unbearable. The ship, that symbol of human strength, broke in two. For decades, survivors who told this story were disbelieved. Experts said it was impossible. Only the discovery of the wreck in 1985 confirmed their terrible truth. The fracture occurred just forward of the third funnel, at the superstructure's weakest point. In those final moments, the band, led by Wallace Hartley, found their immortal purpose. It is said they continued to play until the very last second, not to deny reality, but to offer one last moment of humanity and comfort to those about to die. The final piece they played, according to many testimonies, was the hymn, "Nearer, My God, to Thee." Then, the silence of the music was replaced by the most terrible sound of all, the sound of 1,500 people falling and struggling in water that was 2 degrees below zero. Their shouts, their cries, their whistles for help merged into a heart-rending chorus that drifted across the ocean. Survivors in the lifeboats described it as the most dreadful sound they ever heard, a lament that, in less than 20 minutes, gradually faded into an absolute deathly silence. Imagine the scene for one last moment. There are no more lights, no more music, only the dark silhouette of the Titanic's stern slipping beneath the waves in a final, majestic farewell. The ocean, which was once a path to a new world, is now a frozen tomb for 1,500 souls. In the distance, small boats filled with survivors watch in silence, listening to the echoes of a catastrophe the world believed was impossible. The story of the Titanic is more than the story of a shipwreck. It is a cautionary tale about human hubris, a brutal lesson that technology, no matter how magnificent, is always vulnerable to nature and human error. It is a reminder that, beneath the layers of class and wealth, in the face of death, we are all equal. If you had been on the deck in those final moments, what do you think would have been harder to accept? The cold of the water, or the idea that the unsinkable ship was truly disappearing beneath your feet? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If this journey has shaken you, subscribe to Steel Chronicles. Here, we don't just tell history, we relive it.